So a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which will present promising practices in digital skills development for TVET teachers and trainers. These practices are included in a recent UNEVOC trends mapping study on digital skills development in TVET teacher training. So my name is Sarah Elson-Rogers and I am UNEVOC's Programme Manager of the Innovation and Future of TVET projects. Today's webinar will run for 90 minutes until 11:30, and it will be split into 5 short presentations and a 20-minute panel discussion. And the last 10 minutes will be used to wrap up the webinar. Today's presentations will open with Geeta Subramaniam, who is the author of this trends mapping study. And we will then hear about 4 promising practices included in the report. These will each describe how new digital training approaches for TVET teachers were introduced in different contexts. So our presenters today are Pichpisi Savan from Velocity Academy. This is an example of an online learning platform introduced in Cambodia. Mai Cheng Pesh from Bibliothèques Sans Frontières, who will present the Ideas Cube offline server and digital learning kit, which has most recently been used to help Ukrainian refugees in Poland. Navitri Puliguliam, who is from ILO Indonesia and led a TVET teacher training project, which had to be adjusted for online delivery due to COVID-19. And Vicky Lioget, who has joined us today from the UK Education and Training Foundation, which created an online learning platform designed to both support TVET teachers' digital skills and to build their knowledge and understanding of EdTech. So after the presentations, we will open the floor for questions. As mentioned, we invite you to post your questions in the chat and we will ask them on your behalf to today's speakers. Next slide, please, Aldrich. I will say a few words about how this study fits with the broader work of UNEVOC on TVET teachers and on digitalization. And there are 2 relevant previous publications in this respect. The first is called Promoting Quality in TVET Using Technology. And this report touches upon the many implications of digital technology on TVET teaching, including the need to integrate technology into pedagogical techniques and practice, to use technology to better manage learning needs and learner experiences, and to teach digital skills themselves, including how to use digital technology and tools. The report presents a recommendation for TVET teachers to become lifelong learners and to have continuous access to new approaches to teaching, learning management, and new skills needs. The second report shown on this slide presents the results of a survey of the UNEVOC network members. The report identifies 10 trends facing the future of TVET teachers, and most of the trends emphasize a need for TVET teachers to be forward-looking and to be prepared to deliver TVET in digital formats whilst meeting individual learner needs. At the same time, teachers must build cross-curricular and cross-occupational skills and competencies for their learners, and TVET teachers must be in touch with a broader range of stakeholders to ensure their learners have high quality and high relevant skills. But both of these studies beg the questions, how are TVET teachers going to gain all of these new, future-oriented digital skills? And how is such training going to be provided and delivered? And is it realistic within resource constraints? And to some extent, the pandemic has provided a giant natural experiment in this regard. When TVET teachers and trainers had to deliver learning remotely and needed the digital skills to do so, what happened? Next slide, please, Aldrich. So in the study presented today, Geeta will present evidence on 3 research questions. What were the trends in training TVET teachers in digital skills pre and during the pandemic? What were the challenges, both supply and demand side, pre and during the pandemic? And lastly, what were some promising practices utilised in different geographical regions with different problems addressed and from public, private and NGO contexts? This was a small and rapid study based primarily on secondary sources, and there's still a long way to go in clarifying A, the manifold implications of digitalisation on TVET teaching and delivery, which engages learners in an effective learning process, and B, what are the best policy responses to meet those implications? Both questions are definitely going to need further attention, but for now, I pass the floor to Geeta, who will say more about the trends mapping study. Over to you, Geeta.
Okay. I was going to have Aldrich share, but I'm going to share the study myself. Sorry, it's gone to the middle. Right. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, everyone. My name is Geeta Subramaniam. And as Sarah mentioned, I conducted the trends mapping study on digital skills development in TVET teacher training on behalf of UNESCO-UNEVOC. Today, I'll be giving you a brief overview of the methodology, findings, and recommendations of the study. So let's first turn to the methodology. The aim of the study was to undertake a rapid assessment of the state of TVET teacher digital skills development, both before and during the COVID-19 pandemic. As this was designed to be a rapid assessment, UNESCO-UNEVOC determined that the methodology should involve desk research, that is, analysis of the existing literature and any relevant statistical surveys. And I was also tasked with identifying promising practices in TVET teacher digital skills development and with interviewing senior staff from the identified institutions to learn more about how they have managed to tackle digitalization challenges in the countries or regions in which they operate. I also worked with Sarah and her predecessor at UNESCO-UNEVOC, Jens Liebe, to develop an analytical framework for approaching the study. We decided firstly that the study should examine two dimensions of digitalization, that is the use of digital tools and services for teaching TVET and the digital delivery of TVET through distance learning. And then within each of these dimensions of digitalization, we decided that TVET teaching staff need training and support, firstly, to acquire digital skills and to learn how to use digital tools and technologies for teaching their subject or for delivering training at a distance. And that secondly, they need to learn how to apply these digital tools and resources in a pedagogically effective manner, which is learner-centered. Now, this analytical framework was used to identify trends and challenges in TVET teacher digital skills development in the run-up to the pandemic, that is in just the several years prior to the pandemic, and then during pandemic school closures. So now that you've seen the framework, let's now turn to the trends and challenges during the pre-pandemic period. In terms of trends, what we found was that in the run-up to the pandemic, most TVET teachers and trainers received training in the first dimension of digitalization, but not many in the second dimension. In other words, while 73% of TVET practitioners globally received training in ICT digital skills broadly defined, only 52% received training in distance learning approaches. The trends mapping study also identified some important regional variations in TVET teachers and trainers' access to digital skills training. So across African countries, we found that only 1/2 of secondary school teachers received the minimum required level of teacher training, and that most teacher training programs in the region did not build teachers' digital skills. Furthermore, a large proportion of TVET teachers and trainers seemed to be unprepared for the pandemic school closures in the few years leading up to the pandemic. So what we found is that only 2/3 of TVET providers globally and only 1/3 in Africa had ever delivered TVET remotely prior to the pandemic. Now, turning to the barriers, we found that the main barriers to TVET teachers and trainers being able to use digital tools and services for teaching TVET differed between low-income African countries and higher-income OECD countries. In African countries, the main barriers were a lack of financial and ICT, information communication technology resources, as well as a lack of trained trainers with digital skills. In addition, there were some demand side barriers in terms of teachers being resistant to undergoing digital skills training due to technophobia or an unwillingness to change their teaching practices, thinking that integrating digital tools and services into their teaching would take more time than it would save them time, for example. In OECD countries, the barriers were not so much about lack of access to training, but instead a lack of access to relevant digital skills training that was available to teaching staff. So one of the main problems was that teachers were often taught how to use digital tools and resources, but not how to effectively apply them to their teaching practices, which in many cases led to a lack of teacher confidence in integrating digital tools into their teaching. In addition, many teachers reported a lack of employer support for their digital competence development. So 57% of upper secondary vocational education and training teachers from OECD countries reported having received no incentives from their employers to engage in professional development. Over 2/3, 69%, reported being given no free time to explore how to integrate digital technologies into their teaching. And as we know, you do need the time to be able to play with different tools and to figure out how to make them work within your setting and in terms of your subject area. Across all countries, low income, high income, several key barriers prevented TVET teachers and trainers from gaining the digital skills they needed to deliver TVET remotely or through blended learning methods. First, there was a commonly held belief or idea that distance learning approaches are less effective than face-to-face approaches for delivering TVET and especially practical skills training. Second, TVET providers with small student numbers experience high costs of implementing digital delivery and especially online delivery of TVET. And most TVET teacher training organizations felt they lacked knowledge regarding the pedagogical skills needed for effective TVET delivery. These issues that were leading up to the pandemic affected TVET providers' ability to provide remote training during pandemic school closures. Hence, 25% of TVET providers in high-income countries and over 80% in low-income countries felt unable to provide fully remote training during the pandemic. And in the African region, 1/2 of TVET providers were unable to provide any form of online or offline training. So these were the trends we found from the data we looked at. Now, given pandemic restrictions on face-to-face meetings, TVET teaching staff had to rely on online training to be able to access the skills they needed to be able to digitally deliver TVET through distance learning. And most low-income countries lacked this kind of infrastructure, but they also found that they didn't have adequate human and financial resources to be able to mobilize these to help them get through the pandemic and to train teachers in contexts where they could. And that explains the low percentage in the trend line. In high-income countries, the main barrier to acquiring skills in remote TVET delivery concerned relevance of training once again. What we found was that while governments and TVET institutions scrambled to deploy distance learning tools to ensure learning continuities during pandemic school closures, they tended to pay less attention to training TVET teachers and trainers on how to apply these tools in a pedagogically effective manner. Most OECD countries relied on teaching staff to engage in self-learning to acquire the skills they needed to deliver remote or hybrid training, yet most of the tools and resources available to teaching staff were not TVET specific, so did not address how to, for example, deliver practical training remotely. There was also a continuing problem of lack of employer support that was reported by TVET teachers and trainers in OECD countries. For example, that they were not being given enough time off work to engage in training, and that they weren't reimbursed for the extra expenses they incurred in their household bills, for example, broadband and electricity, despite being expected to engage in online professional development activities. Now, this lack of training incentives tended to dissuade many teachers and trainers from engaging in training, which affected TVET training quality, while lack of employer support has led in many cases to an increase in teacher mental health issues. So these were the main challenges during that period. Now, putting these statistics and ideas together, what we found is that the pandemic really highlights the need for concerted action in 5 key areas. Firstly, strong policies and strategies on digitalization in TVET to ensure that teaching staff have the skills needed to prepare learners for the future of work and learning. Multi-stakeholder partnerships and networks, especially in cases where government capacity is weak. Digital skills training programs that are well designed and target specific challenges to TVET teachers' participation in digital skills training. A culture of inclusiveness and cooperation to reduce digital divides, for example, through offering open educational resources. And finally, further research on the digital and pedagogical skills training needs of TVET teaching staff pertaining to each of the dimensions of digitalization we spoke about, but especially the distance learning aspect. The promising practices you're all going to be hearing about today cover these areas. So for example, Vicky's promising practice from the UK is linked to the UK's new legal digital skills entitlement, so therefore the policies and strategies aspect, but also offers free access to training for TVET teachers and trainers across the globe. Navitri's promising practice from the ILO in Indonesia highlights the value of mobilizing partnerships and networks, as you're going to hear about in a few minutes. And Mui Cheng's and Pitchpazi's promising practices are very much designed to target the barriers experienced by teaching staff in areas where internet connectivity is low or non-existent, and that is the Bibliothèque Sans Frontières promising practice of Mui Cheng, and then those where there is internet connectivity and digital resources. So I think I've said enough about the study for now, and I think we should turn very quickly to the main attraction of today's webinar, which is the promising practices presentations. So I will just say thank you very much, and I'm going to turn now to the first promising practice. So the first presenter of promising practice will be Pisali Sovong, who's the co-founder of Velocity Academy. Pisili is a design thinker who addresses educational issues and gaps. She's an e-learning specialist at Good Return and a design trainer at IT Step Academy. She has more than 3 years experience in empirical research, and she's also an active member of education circles, inspiring educators to use digital technologies to strengthen their pedagogical development and to engage in continuous upskilling. Her research interests lie in blockchain technology, design thinking, learning experiences, learning analytics, and e-learning design. And she holds a Bachelor of Education degree in teaching English as a foreign language from the Institute of Foreign Languages of Royal University of Phnom Penh. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Pisili to please present her gamified upskilling platform for TVET teachers and company trainers. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon from Cambodia. My name is Pisai, and I'm from Velocity Academy, which is a tech startup working on bringing design and technology and teaching together to support teachers, especially TVET trainers in Cambodia. Just a brief introduction about us. We are an edtech startup operating in Cambodia, and we funded, my co-founder and I funded this startup in 2020, and we have worked with 50 outstanding teachers in the past, and now we're working with around 200 more to support their upskilling and their teaching practice. So before we move forward, I just want to raise this topic. I would like to invite you to think about the roles of teachers. What do they do, and what you imagine they doing to support teachers, what are the daily activities. So just think about it. You can write in the chat box as you want. But here, my co-founder and I want to reimagine the roles of teachers. We want them to become a design thinker, thinking from design perspective, and to empathize students, learners, and to support them at their best from design perspective. And we want to help them to become a pedagogical expert in the way that they can, or they are able to utilize teaching practice or techniques in various contexts, and to be able to utilize technology, digital technologies, to support their teaching practice, and to finally become a digital savvy who teach their class in a more diverse background, not the whiteboard centric anymore. With this being said, our target audience or people that we work with include TVET trainers, educational NGO teachers, and secondary education, secondary teachers, mostly in public schools of Cambodia. So what or how exactly does the platform work? So we actually consult with school, consult with the head teacher or the teachers themselves. Since we work from design perspective, we're trying to understand the root cause of the problem, understand the pains, the frustrations of teachers, and the needs to identify the gaps in their experience, and to tailor skill training that help them improve or innovate their teaching practice, and to be able to use those practice to engage with the students in order to create a more active environment in the classroom, and to eventually create to help students practice or get better performance than ever. So this is just a high level of our concept. What set us apart from the initiatives in Cambodia would be that we want to emphasize on the lifelong learning and the evidence-based learning, at which in this area this area are often overlooked by skill trainers. So we want to encourage teachers to become a lifelong learner themselves, because we think that teaching is a two-way street. So they teach and they learn, teach and they learn. It's an endless circle. It's a two-way street. So we want them to become a lifelong learner themselves and to learn from evidence or evidence of practice in different contexts. So we bring about a lot of experience from fellow educators and researchers in the field of teaching from different disciplines. And finally, we just want to address that we want to relieve the stress of time management of educators. We believe that they handling a lot of tasks over the day, and we want them to think that upskilling can take very little time in each day, and as long as they committed to it. So this was the initiative that we created last year, just to involve teachers from different sectors, and most of them are from TVET education and secondary education from the public school in Cambodia across many provinces in Cambodia. And we selected 50 outstanding, committed, and enthusiastic teachers to work with us. We use this tool called EdHelp to create skill training, to create micro courses, and to localize the content, the skill training in Khmer, English, to make it available, and to eliminate language barriers for teachers. And those skill trainings include the teaching skills and digital skills, and we also address the well-being of the teachers, the mental well-being of the teacher as well. We included it in the teaching skill because we think it's somehow related, interconnected to each other. So one day they understand that the well-being of themselves is important. They also understand the well-being of students are also important. And with all these skills, teachers we have seen a lot of progress or rapid improvement in their teaching practice, and they are happy to keep exploring further practice in the future. So I just want to highlight 3 challenges that we face. First one would be the funding, the resource we need to operate, and the time availability of teachers. Since they're pretty busy, they have a very hectic schedule throughout the week, and we're trying to address this problem by designing a more flexible program for teachers. And finally, the accreditation of our skill training, which is still an answer question we need to answer to. So these are the team, just two of us, and we have friends and volunteers who help us with the development of the content, communication, so on and so forth. This is Pasokvina, and she's a more about an operational lead, and myself as a technical person working with teachers directly and design skill training for teachers. And if you have any questions or want to catch up, want to have a conversation with us, please feel free to connect us through this email address or phone number if you're in Cambodia, or visit our website. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. And just so everyone knows, we are going to be posting these slides on the website, the UNESCO-UNEVOC website after the webinar. Okay, so the next presenter will be Mui Cheng Pesh, who's the Director of Education, Content and Training at Bibliothèques Sans Frontières, also known as Libraries Without Borders. And she'll be speaking on the Ideas Cube offline server and digital learning kit that BSF has implemented in Burundi and Democratic Republic of the Congo. But I'll just give you a few words about Mui Cheng. She graduated from the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, France. She's worked as a researcher in cognitive psychology, studying memory, attention, and social cognition at the UCL, University College London, and at the EPFL. I'm not sure what that is, I'll let her say. She joined Library Without Borders in 2014 after working with the organization on the adaptation of Khan Academy for French-speaking countries. She then created the Department of Education, Content and Training at Libraries Without Borders. And with her team, she promotes empowerment and agency through innovative methodologies and tools that are carefully curated in terms of content and have experimentation activities that encourage creativity, analytical and creative thinking, and learning by doing. So without further ado, I'd like to pass you over to Mui Cheng. Thank you very much, Mui Cheng.
Thank you very much, Gita, for this introduction, and very happy to be with all of you this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. So my name is Mui Cheng Pesh, and I'm the Education Director at Libraries Without Borders. Libraries Without Borders is a global NGO that works to empower communities worldwide by providing a quality access to education and to information. We today work in more than 30 countries, deploying tools and content, most importantly, so that we can enable the empowerment and the strengthening of agency of vulnerable populations in very different contexts, from high-income countries such as France, the US, or Belgium, to humanitarian contexts such as in Bangladesh or at the frontiers of Ukraine currently, or as well in low and middle-income countries, for instance, in West Africa and Central Africa. Today, I wanted to talk to you about one of our projects in the vocational training sector. But first of all, let me take a step back and talk about this challenge that is connectivity at a time where we are talking about innovation and technology in vocational training. So today, 50% of the world population doesn't have access to the internet. And while access to information is essential and can play a key role in vocational training and education, the internet is lacking where people need it the most, in the poorest and in the most exposed part of the world. And the situation is even worse for refugees, who are 50% less likely than the average populations to have access to the internet. What we're trying to do at Libraries Without Borders is tackle a triple challenge. The first is connectivity. People who do not have access to the internet because there's no infrastructure, or because it's too expensive, or because it's censored. The second challenge is localized content, having access to digital content that are contextualized, that are localized in the right languages, and that reflect the realities of the teachers and the realities of the students. And the third challenge, and not the least, is ownership. Working on solutions that are truly integrated, anchored into the local ecosystem, and that are not simply tools that have been provided but do not necessarily fit the local use. So these are the challenges that we're trying to tackle. And to do that at Libraries Without Borders, what we do is that we design offline internet solutions for response in areas with no or low access to the internet. What we do is a triple solution in sorts. So to the connectivity challenge, our response is creating innovative, frugal, but also robust technologies for offline access to content and to rich media content adapted to difficult conditions. So the idea is to have tools that are able to work regardless of the temperature, regardless of the connectivity of the region, regardless of the humidity conditions, etc. And having tools that are able to be, that people can repair locally as well. To the content challenge, what we do, and that's the core of our work at Libraries Without Borders, is curate localized and easy to update content in the relevant languages. So today we work in 25 languages, reflecting languages that are very well represented in the digital content world, but also languages that are less represented, such as, for instance, Kinyarwanda, Kirundi, Wolof, etc. And finally, for the ownership challenge, what we try to do is really work with local partners who are able to take hold of the tools, take hold of the content, and build community of practice so that people locally can share the innovations of use that they have come up with. Sorry, there's a slight issue. So our solutions are designed to fit first the needs of the population, in terms of information security, in terms of education, in terms of professional training, the needs of field actors. So the idea is either to work on outreach, that is to say, providing them with the means to reach more people that are hard to reach, or providing them with way of enhancing the quality of their intervention. And finally, we need to fit the field realities for frugal, contextualized, sustainable, and agile response. Today, I'm going to talk about one project called the Ideas Cube. The Ideas Cube is a nomadic digital library that can be used without any connectivity. It's basically a small computer that creates a local Wi-Fi hotspot and that enables end users, up to 50 end users at the same time, to access digital content without any connectivity. It usually comes, and that is the case in this project, with a set of tablets as well as a computer and a video projector that enables the teachers and the students to have both a collective and an individual use of the content on the Ideas Cube. The project here has been a project that we have deployed in Burundi and in DRC, in vocational training centers, 13 in Burundi, 15 in DRC, gathering more than 5,000 end users and 50 teachers who have been trained to use the tools. We have been running this program since 2019, and so we've been hit by the pandemic as well, but it's been a good way to test the ownership of the tool and the resilience of this offline internet solution to the local context. And so in terms of impact, the main results that we've got at this moment is first, an increase in the registration rate in vocational training centers and an augmented retention rate of the students. Because the main challenge that the vocational training centers encountered were actually access to manuals, access to textbooks that were really truly relevant to the local context and that reflected the local ecosystem. We are still in the process of evaluating the educational outcomes of this program, specifically in the vocational training centers, but in a similar context where we have deployed this sort of tools in schools and refugee camps, we've seen an increase of 23% in educational outcomes compared to traditional settings. And the qualitative studies show that it's less access to the tools than the different use that the teachers had with the tools that were the main factor of impact, actually. And let me finish on the challenges that we've encountered with this project. First, it's the lack of relevant content. We need more local content creation that are truly adapted to the local context. One issue that we've encountered, I'd love to discuss that with you guys, is that most of the content that's been created for low and middle income countries actually come from high income countries and do not at all reflect the needs, the equipment, the realities of the work locally. And so we've been working with the teachers to create Creative Commons content in local languages that can be shared across different communities. The second challenge is digital preparedness. we see offline internet not as in opposition to the internet, but rather as a way to reduce the gap between connected and unconnected regions, and to prepare populations for digital literacy and the use of the internet when it comes. And finally, as you all, we've been hit by the COVID-19 crisis that has added some challenges in terms of skill transfer, in terms of capacity building. That being said, we've also been able to test ways in which asynchronous internet could provide access to training material. We could build local community of practices, etc. I'm going to stop there, but I would be more than happy to continue the discussion with you during the Q&A or afterwards. You'll have my email address on the first slide. Many thanks again, and talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Moi Cheng. And I think that you've given a lot of food for thought, and hopefully we'll have some good discussions in the panel discussion to follow. Now, the next presenter will be Navitri Putri Guillaume, who's from the ILO Indonesia. She's currently the National Project Officer for the UN Employment and Livelihood Project at ILO Indonesia. But she was formerly the Project Officer for the Women in STEM project. And that's what she'll be talking about. Navitri has more than 10 years experience working in the nonprofit sector and in academia. She started her career at the ILO as National Project Officer for the Women in STEM project. And prior to joining the ILO, worked for several years at the Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development and the World Economic Forum. Navitri's been involved in numerous projects, excuse me, on a range of topics, including skills development, environmental politics, conflict resolution, migration, security, and foreign policy. And she obtained her PhD in political science from the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva. So without further ado, let me turn you to Navitri and look forward to a great talk.
Thank you very much, Gita. Good morning, everyone. My name is Navitri Putri Guillaume. Together with my colleague, Santi Otto, I was a National Project Officer for Women in STEM project at the ILO Indonesia. Originally, our project focused on delivering technical and soft skills on ICT-related skills for women workers and job seekers in Indonesia. As the pandemic hit, the public TVET institutions, our partners who were supposed to deliver this training, could not do so remotely. However, in Indonesia, it was forbidden to deliver face-to-face training during the pandemic. We then had to complement our project with a training for public TVET instructors to enable them to create and deliver online training, since we believe it was something urgently needed by the public TVET institution during the pandemic. To provide a government-recognized and high-quality training for these instructors, we mobilized resources within and beyond our networks. We created a public-private partnership that has enabled us to train hundreds of instructors from all over Indonesia. Next slide, please. We started our journey with getting validation and support from the Ministry of Manpower, especially the Directorate of Instructors and Training Personnel Development. We collaborated with Skillful, a private training provider, to share the process of transforming their offline bootcamp and training to online training. We then identified tools and skills required to create and deliver online training, as well as the best trainers to teach each tool and skill to the instructors. It resulted in a rich and practical training program for instructors from different disciplines. We delivered 2 batches of training fully online, in June to July 2020 for the first batch, and October to December 2020 for the second batch. We trained a total of 180 instructors from 131 public TVET institutions located in 28 provinces out of 34 provinces in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Learning from the first batch, we noticed that instructors lack information, knowledge, and skills to create content for online training that may discourage them to start the transformation. Therefore, for the second batch, In addition to introducing the instructors to design thinking and student-centered learning journey, we added many practical skills to use specific free multimedia tools that can help them to create and deliver online training. We mobilize our networks to identify and engage trainers specializing on specific tool and skill to deliver rich and engaging training sessions. For instance, Skillful use their networks to engage a professional cinematographer to provide a training on video creation using a smartphone. Meanwhile, ILO searched for and engaged professional public speaking trainers to teach the instructors on how to speak in front of a camera. Next slide, please. Since the training was the first of its kind, we took several quality assurance steps. First, we ensured full commitments from all participants by reminding them several times to arrive on time every day. Participants could lose their place in the training if they were late on the first day or if they are being late for more than 2 times afterwards. My colleague Santi and I were also present during each training session to monitor and evaluate how the session was delivered. By doing this, we could find out which one worked best and which one needed improvement. Lastly, as instructors did not have access to premium Zoom account, Santi and I created a short extra session on hosting online meeting using Zoom outside the hours of the training. With this, instructors had the chance to practice hosting a Zoom session using many tools such as breakout rooms and whiteboards that are available in Zoom. Next slide, please. As a result, we have changed the mindset of instructors with regard to online training. Prior to the training, the majority would say that it will be very difficult to transform their training to online training. After our training, 70% of them stated that online transformation can be done. 66% stated that online transformation must be done, while 50% of them now believe that online transformation is easy to do. And 38% of them actually have started their transformation journey. For example, a food processing instructor in South Kalimantan province now provides training material to students using Google Classroom. She also uses the quizzes, a gamified student engagement platform, to administer summative tests and plans to use augmented reality tools to explain food safety to the students. Thank you very much. And please contact me if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Navitri. That was very useful and instructive presentation. I think we can all learn something from that. So the final speaker for today is Vicky Liogier from the UK's Education and Training Foundation. Vicky is the National Head of EdTech and Digital Skills, and she's going to be speaking on the Education and Training Foundation's enhanced digital teaching platform. But let me first give you a little bit of a bio on Vicky herself. Vicky initially worked as a freelance illustrator and taught graphic design and illustration at South Thames College. In 1993, Vicky acquired her first Apple Mac, Wacom tablet, color printer, Adobe Suite and scanner, and she could foresee the impact that such technology would have on creative industries and education. In 2008, as a keen early adopter of technology, Vicky decided to refocus her career on change management and digital capability, which resulted 10 years later in 2018 in Vicky being recognized as one of the UK's EdTech 50, which celebrates prominent people, products, and projects that are shaping education and technology sector across the UK. So now, without further ado, I'd like to turn to Vicky and invite her to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chita, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be with you today to such a wonderful global event. So if there are any tweeters amongst you, you've got my handle here, as well as UNEVOC, UNESCO, of course, and the Education and Training Foundation. And if you are tweeting, please use the hashtag TVET. Thanks. So I'm going to tell you about the enhanced digital teaching platform. 4 key points to this presentation. First of all, a little bit about the further education and training sector, then why we developed the digital teaching professional framework and how it does underpin the enhanced digital teaching platform. And then we will conclude and of course have time for a discussion afterwards. So what is the Education Training Foundation that I work for? We are the expert body for professional development and standards in further education and training in England. So what is the further education and training sector? Well, it is a rather complex and diverse vocational training sector. We've got 127,000 teachers and trainers across England, as well as 49,000 curriculum support staff. In terms of types of providers, there's quite varied. Obviously, a group of colleges and that teach more or less 2.2 million learners each year, as well as education providers such as employer providers, independent training providers, local authorities, and third sector providers. So as you can see, it's quite a diverse sector. Sorry. So this is why we've developed the digital teaching professional framework. It was really to address that complexity and diversity of the sector and have a shared understanding of what it means to embed new technologies in teaching, learning, and assessment, and also help teachers by giving them a clear developmental pathway in terms of improving their digital capabilities, and most importantly, to redefine their pedagogic approaches so that they could improve the learning experience of their learners, and most importantly, the learners' employability outcome. So this is a framework. As you can see, we call it the DTPF, or Digital Teaching Professional Framework. It is structured in a linear manner on the teacher's journey, but it's not meant to be approached in a linear manner. It's very much an aspirational framework that responds to our immediacy mindset. It builds from the GISC digital 6 elements of digital capabilities, the European Commission DigComp Edu, and the 20 professional standards from the Education and Training Foundation. Across the 7 competencies that you can see here, there are 3 stages of performance. Exploring, blue, is for those of us who don't know anything about EdTech. Adopting, green, is for those of us who are already embedding a little bit of EdTech in their practice. And that would be most of us since the pandemic. And stage 3 is for those of us who are feeling far more comfortable supporting others and able to critique what technology may be more suited for a given learning context. So how is this framework different from what has been done in the past? Well, it is different because it's not focusing on digital skills, but instead on teaching and learning. So it's speaking the language of educators. It has been developed in very close consultation with the sector, with 5 levels of consultation. And we've adopted a user-centered design process from the start across the full development. And finally, it is different because it is a dynamic framework. It's not just something that you pin on a wall and you consult. It actually came live in January 2019 at TVET with the enhanced digital teaching platform. So what is the enhanced? Well, enhanced has been designed to remove barriers to engagement. It is a mobile-first platform So it is responsive and adaptive to whatever device you access it from. We've got optional sign up. It's totally free to access. Because we believe that actually signing up would be a barrier in itself. I've mentioned the user-centered design process. We've adopted bite-sized learning modules of 5 minutes only, because we know that time is a major barrier to professional development. It is pedagogy focused, inclusive, with a broad range of examples across the different vocational areas. And we've built gamification across the 5 stages of performance, and we are fostering communities of practice. So this is the homepage of the enhanced digital teaching platform. And since it's launched in January 2019, it has been evolving. We now host 2 CPD offers on the enhanced digital teaching platform. First of all, the DTPF, that is underpinning 175 micro-learning modules in EdTech, as well as 20 essential digital skills modules of 30 minutes each. And then in the back end, we've got a management dashboard to support providers in really strengthening their support framework. Now, this is the essential digital skills framework, which is underpinning the program of 20 modules of 30 minutes. And you can see other resources are also included, such as scenarios, guidance, and teaching exemplars. For this program, you will need to sign up. You will need to take the self-assessment, which will give you a capability profile. But then in turn will give you pointers to specific modules that will help you fill your skills gap. This program is aimed at educators delivering the new entitlement to adults with no or low digital skills. And then I've mentioned the enhanced management dashboard and how it can really help providers accelerate their digital learning strategies. We have nearly 15,000 registered users and over 88,000 users. Altogether, over 330,000 learning sessions have taken place, with over 29,000 badges have been awarded. We've built social media functionalities across the platform, so you can follow practitioners, you can like, you can bookmark, and of course, comment. So we believe in building a social learning framework. To conclude, the digital teaching professional platform has been funded by the Department for Education and has been awarded the EdTech 50 Award for product and been recognized 2 years in a row as one of the best EdTech product in the UK. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I suppose we are now going to move, Gita, in the debate, aren't we?
Yes,
I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you. So hopefully you can see the diversity as well as the usefulness across this diversity of the 4 promising practices that were presented. I mean, there was a large range, but what they all have in common is really tackling digitalization challenges and those barriers that we spoke about in the report, and promoting a very smart approach to promoting TVET teachers and trainers, not simply digital skills, but also pedagogical skills and the ability to combine the 2 together. So I would like to now have us turn from the presentations to the panel discussion, which will feature questions that have arisen during the chat and also outside of this particular webinar. And Sarah Elson-Rogers has said that she will present the questions and then I will distribute them amongst our presenters. So I'm going to be doing that as I feel, but I'll make sure everyone gets a chance so you can hear something from each of the presenters to the extent that I can. So please, Sarah, would you like to give us the first question?
Yes, there was an interesting question posed by Cosme Zinzuojo from Benin, who raises the question about how to get policymakers on board in terms of the importance of integrating digital skills in teaching and learning. Now, as you pointed out, Geeta, we have very different practices that have just been presented. And Geeta, one of the conclusions from your study was the importance of being coherent within a TVET digitalization strategy. So the question to the panel is how involved were policymakers in what you have done? Did they drive the process? Did you have some convincing to do? And as a kind of part B to that question, the issue of accreditation of what your teachers and trainers are learning.
Okay, I'm going to firstly have Navitri answer the question because I think she had to do a little work from what I understand in engaging the policymakers. So Navitri, I'll have you speak first, and then I'm going to probably go to Pisili and see what she's got to say on that, okay?
Thank you so much, Geeta. Thank you, Sarah, for the question. As I said in my presentation, when we wanted to start our training for instructors, we actually went to the Ministry of Manpower because in Indonesia, there are two ministries who are in charge of vocational education. One is the Ministry of Education for high school vocational schools, but Ministry of Manpower actually manage thousands of training centers, what we call Balai Latihan Kerja. So what we did, we actually went to the Ministry of Manpower to ask, because we had this idea, but we needed a validation from them. Do they think it is actually needed for the instructors to learn digital skills to transform the training from offline to online? And they actually agreed. And it was very interesting because they agreed to the collaboration because they believe it was very important, since during pandemic, it was forbidden for any educational institution to do face-to-face learning or teaching. So we received support from the Ministry of Manpower in the sense that they distributed the information to all instructors that are managed, that are working in all the public TVET institutions under the ministry. What is interesting enough when we talk about accreditation, at that time, everything was new. I think we started the training only 3 months after the pandemic started in Indonesia. So there wasn't policy at that time. However, once we succeeded with the training, the ministry saw the value of the training and also the need for guidelines for the to encourage the instructors to transform their training from offline to online. I think it was quite a coincidence. A few weeks after our training ended, the ministry actually established a guideline that has to be followed by public TVET institutions that are directly managed under the ministry. So then we really hope that by providing the training before it was required for the instructors to actually transform, we be able to somehow cut the waiting time. Usually what usually happens after a policy was established until the implementation of the policy. So now the instructors who already received our training could transform their online training as required by the ministry. Thank you, Geeta.
Thank you. Pisili, I'm going to ask you the same question. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you. I'll just put it in a very simple way. The nature of our initiative is very personalized, very in a very free form. So we support the idea of continuous, continual professional development, lifelong learning. So in terms of the coherence or consistency of the training is quite it's not very it comes in a very semi-structured manner, and our engagement with the policymaker is not that remarkable to discuss, but we have discussed and we have worked with a local NGO that has a very long-term relationship with Ministry of Education in Cambodia called Cambodia Action to Promote Education, and they endorse our idea, our initiatives to support teacher in a more free manner, where teachers, trainers, educators adopt lifelong learning concept and to actually keep exploring teaching practice that can be really helpful for them. We appreciate intersectionality at which we want to create so much more in that area. So per se, we want to encourage teachers to explore other teaching techniques in different disciplines. For example, in my case, I help my fellow teachers to use teaching techniques or methods in language teaching to teach mathematics, physics, things like that. So we really enjoy the intersectionality in this area. And in terms of accreditation, we have discussed and joined force with a key person in Cambodia Action to Promote Education to look for accreditation system to support such training and to make it more accessible and more coherent in the way that we can streamline the skill training for all TVET teachers and trainers, not just in Cambodia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah, shall we take a second question? You're on mute.
Of course I am. So going to the other side, in terms of moving from policymakers now to participants, we received a question from Phil Hawkins, which I'm slightly going to adjust. I hope you don't mind, Phil. Did your participants have certain characteristics or attitudes which made them more responsive to what you were doing? In all of the presentations, there is something common, which is it requires the TVET teacher, trainer or member of staff to opt in to your training on offer. So there's a certain self-selection process going on. Do any of the panel have anything to say about this?
Can I direct these questions to firstly Mui Cheng and then to Vicky? Would that be all right?
Thank you. Thanks, Gita, and thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Phil, for the question. It's a very interesting question and something that we've been trying to pinpoint as well. Why do some of the projects spark so much enthusiasm, and why do others perhaps lack this type of innovation? And I think it relates a lot to who is part of the project. Perhaps if I can venture a few hypotheses. First, there's a lot of, I think a common common point is a lot of frustration with the current system. And so teachers were really dissatisfied with what they are doing currently, the resources they have access to, and who are willing to experiment, test other types of methodologies. I think also agility and this ability to be really flexible, have an idea, have a strategy, but then be able to swerve and to switch quite quickly to something else when it doesn't work. And so there's some sort of also of I think frugality could be a word, prototyping things quickly, experimenting them, testing them out, and if it doesn't work, not have any not be too scrupulous and be able to switch to something else. And then I would say what we've seen is that the population of people of teachers who have opted in has really evolved. At the beginning, we had a core team of people who were really motivated, who were really keen on investing time and efforts. And then as the first year ended, the second began, I think they were beginning also, other teachers who were perhaps less enthusiastic were beginning to sense that there could be a way of doing that could be integrated into their own way of teaching. And I think the challenge for us was really to try to build this core community of practice, have sort of a team of ambassadors who would then be able to speak to their peers and highlight the successes, but also the challenges in very pragmatic, very down-to-earth way. And perhaps to go back to the question about policymakers, I think one key element for us is also impact evaluations, and having, as it is the case here, case studies who really highlight the realities of the field, but really impact evaluation, showing what works, what doesn't work, why. And one of the pet peeve we're fighting here is also this idea that providing access to tools and providing access to equipment is enough, whereas actually the hard work is about content for us, and it's about soft skills and adoption. And I think that's something that is a struggle to advocate for, because it's less tangible, but I think it's the essence of what makes such a project a success for us. I'm not sure I answered your question, but here are a few thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Mui-Ching. Vicky, can I turn the question to you as well, please?
Yes, thank you, Gita. So if we think about learning, really, our ability to learn really depends on different factors, intrinsic factors, our level of motivation, our confidence, extrinsic factors, social context, for instance, our age group, and other factors, whether we're employed, unemployed, and so on. So those will obviously influence why people will engage with learning, but providing the right sort of conditions is also important. And that's why the enhanced digital teaching platform was designed to remove those barriers to engagement. So we thought about technophobia, we thought about confidence with gamification, we thought about time in terms of micro-learning content. So all those elements were actually considered in order to remove that. And we really concentrated on accessibility as well. And we're delighted to say that the Enhance is fully accessible and compliant with the new UK accessibility regulations for the public sector. We also have a large number of webinars, which are totally free to access in terms of recordings of those webinars. I think there are 35 altogether. And there is one, which is one series, which was delivered by Alistair McNaught at the beginning of 2021, which is very much on advanced accessibility skills that will help those of us who are perhaps supporting others. So we stimulate people through gamification. I've mentioned the badges. So you were talking about accreditation earlier on, but for us, those badges are essentially there on the first 1 star to recognize commitment to our self-development. It doesn't mean you've learned anything. It means you've opened your mind to the world of possibilities and looking into what it is that you could do, how it is that you could start redefining your pedagogic approaches. Where we're actually measuring impact of the training is when you can gain a 2-star or a 3-star badge, when you reflect on the impact the training has had on your practice and you share reflection, which is then reviewed by 2 blind reviewers. Then for a 3-star, you will need to share a resource that you have developed, which is aligned to the training and reflect on the impact the resource has had on the learning experience of your learners. So you can see where we're going there. In terms of policies, the EdTech program was funded by DFE, but was really something that we proposed to DFE as part of our strategy for EdTech. It was informed through a national training needs analysis with further education sector, and over 2,200 participants responded and over 70 organizations as well. The Essential Digital Skills program was requested from DFE. It was to support teachers to deliver the new entitlement to digital skills and to adults with no or low digital skills, sorry. And it was developed through research, qualitative and quantitative, looking at skills gap of educators currently delivering the ILT functional skills, having to move to the new Essential Digital Skills entitlement. And the program was therefore working slightly differently. And that's why we have a self-assessment at the start to really give pointers to teachers to the modules that they need to complete to fill that gap. We've built behind it some games, interactive games, role play games, and so on, which is a different way to measure and keep up to date our knowledge and skills about essential digital skills to live and work in a digital society. I don't know if I've answered all your questions. Feel free to ask some more.
Thank you so much, Vicky. And just to say again, the Enhanced Digital Teaching Platform can be accessed by anyone, anywhere. And it not only allows you to watch the videos, but there's a written transcript for those with low connectivity so that you can read what's being covered in addition to seeing what's being presented. Sarah, do we have time for one more question, do you think?
I'm going to ask a really quick question because we have one from the perspective of policymakers, one from the perspective of participants. So I have a question that I think is applicable to all of today's panelists, but Geeta, you may have to pick one. You've all clearly put a great deal of thought into the content, and every presentation here has talked about design thinking and thinking about the teaching and learning processes. So the question is quick: how are you going to keep all this content up to date?
Very good. I'm going to let one of you raise your hands quickly.
We've got 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to go back to Pisli.
Thank you. I'll keep it quick so Vicky might have something to add. To keep the content updated, we circulate the content with all the educators. We're trying to create a multidisciplinary force here with teachers who teach different subjects or content or courses to join force and to actually help us and contribute to the content design. And on top of that, we also scan through and comb through a lot of research, practice-based research specifically action research of teachers and educators in different parts of the world. Right now, we're coming through a lot of practices in Southeast Asia, but we looking forward to more practices soon in the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to use my role as moderator to allow Vicky to answer this question as well.
Thank you very much, Gita. Yes, the Enhanced Digital Teaching Platform and the two hosted programs have been updated as we went along. So we've got a range of reports in the backend, for instance, looking automatically into broken links. So any broken links will be updated and so on. Gita mentioned that the programs are currently totally free to access. This is true. However, due to changes in funding mechanism, we will need to look at a diversification of funding, which means that we may need to charge a small fee for subscriptions of users from the beginning of the new academic year. So currently it is still currently free, but we will look at partnership as well. But we are looking obviously at reinvesting that the money that we would be charging if we do go for subscriptions into updating the resources. Please note that all the resources can be reviewed and rated by users from a quantitative viewpoint out of 5 stars and qualitatively with a comment. So those are very useful to keep us updated on what it is that we need to improve as well.
Okay, Sarah, should we stop, or shall I just get one more person to? Okay, let's stop then.
I think it's time to wrap up. We're at 11:22.
Okay, right. So we're now going to be just speaking quickly. Do you need the presentation up, Sarah? About next steps for the work and.
Yeah, do you want to mention the what we're doing on the TVET forum?
Yeah,
that we will...
so before we go to the slide, I'd just like to say, firstly, that the promising practices that have been presented today are all available as write-ups in the trends mapping study on digital development in TVET teacher training. Secondly, I know most of you joined this webinar via a link posted in the UNEVOC TVET forum. And following this webinar, I am inviting comments, questions, anything you'd like on the TVET forum. And we'll also try and see whether our presenters are willing to join the TVET forum to host any questions that are presented to themselves. Otherwise, I'll try and email them and get some responses. And that's really all I want to say for now. I look forward to continuing to speak with you on the TVET forum after this webinar. Thank you. I'll turn to Sarah now.
Great, thanks, Gita. Aldrich, could you put up my slides again, please? I'm just going to say a special thank you to Gita for working with UNEVOC on our study, and to all our presenters today who have given freely of their time. I just want to say a few words about where our work will go from here. So, as you can see, discussing the impact of digitalisation on TVET teachers is just one part of UNEVOC's work on the implications of digitalisation on TVET more broadly. And as you can see on this slide, so we have 4 areas of work that we're currently working on. The project under the red icon is related to digital skills and competence frameworks for teachers, learners and citizens. We heard about one today from Vicky. But in this project, UNEVOC is building an online repository of the very different frameworks in place, which we plan to keep updated. We are also planning to prepare some short articles and thought pieces on some of the issues related to digital competence frameworks. For example, how do they define the different digital skills, realistic in terms of closing the digital skills gap? And can they keep up with digital advances? The second listed project is this one, which I will speak about in one moment. The third project is we have a small online project presenting open educational resources. We discuss their characteristics, how they are used, and we provide links to some OER platforms and content. And last but not least, we're building an online library of so-called toolkits designed for TVET teachers and providers to assess their readiness in a range of topics, which include digitalization. These toolkits have been prepared by UNEVOC, but also by many other organisations. So my final slide is just to say a few last words about this piece of work on digital skills development for TVET teachers and trainers. As Geeta pointed out, in the coming weeks and months, we are going to extract some key data from the publication and put some summary data online. We have interviewed each of the presenters here today, and we've asked more in-depth questions than during our panel. So we will put those interviews online. And also going forward, we would like to collect more examples of promising practices from around the world. So my final slide, all I have left to do now is to thank you for attending today. We hope you've enjoyed today's webinar and presentations, and we hope you stay in touch and keep checking back with UNEVOC's work. And I wish you an enjoyable Tuesday, and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.